Yes, it's finally happening. The powder keg blew up. It's time for World War I. Let's do this. You might remember from our last video at the end of Unit 8 that Europe at the end of the 1800s was considered to be a powder keg, meaning people were so tense that eventually there was going to be an explosion and things were going to blow up. Spoiler alert, that blow up is World War I. And today we're going to talk about all the things that cause World War I, and this will all take place within the year 1914. This is the year in which we will see the spark that causes the explosion that becomes one of the greatest tragedies in all of world history. Now, while I know that I'm not your average history teacher, I'm going to do something today that pretty much every other world history teacher has done. I'm going to use an acronym. I present to you the 4 main causes of World War I. See what I did there? Now, to this point in world history, this is the largest military conflict we've ever seen, so there's definitely more than 4 causes that make this happen. But for your sake, it's easier to just know these 4, because they're actually 4 things that you've already covered. The first cause of World War I is militarism, or the growth of large militaries, something that many countries around the world are embracing in order to gain world power status. Now, having a military or using a military is nothing new in world history. Since the beginning of history, people and civilizations have constantly been fighting and using militaries to protect their interests and gain resources and defend themselves. But in the late 1800s, the growth of militaries that we see is unprecedented. And this is almost completely due to something that unfolds during this time that we already talked about, the Industrial Revolution. As the Industrial Revolution took hold and more people began to work in factories, one such type of factory was a munitions factory, which was designed to produce weapons and ammunitions at large scales. Because of the ability to produce large amounts of weapons and train soldiers very quickly thanks to the Industrial Revolution, countries now have bigger armies than they've ever had before. We're talking armies that have over 1 million troops. Russia, who was a little late to the Industrial Party, was actually the first army in world history to have over 1 million soldiers. Very quickly, we start to see a competition between countries, especially in Europe, to see who has the bigger army. I mean, really, it's just a big flex off. In order to keep armies large, many European countries turned to a process called conscription, which you probably know better as the draft, when the government forces civilians into military service. But you don't build armies just to keep them around and look at them. I mean, it's like when I was a kid with Legos. I didn't just build Lego sets just to look at them. I built them to play Lego Star Wars. That's why militarism is truly a problem. It's not just the fact that these countries have them, it's that they're preparing to use them. In many ways, the kings and emperors and world leaders at this time were kind of like little kids playing with toys. They were going to use these militaries that they had built up. In a lot of ways, war was a game to them. This is why all European countries had what they called mobilization plans, preparations to use their armies in battle and to attack certain countries in order to gain goals based on certain circumstances. Because of militarism and these mobilization scenarios, it's only a matter of time before war breaks out in Europe. The second cause of World War I is alliances. At this point in European history, European countries are teaming up with each other to reach their goals. Alliances are like a political insurance policy. When you team up with another country, you got backup. Hey, if I go attack them, will you help me? Yeah, of course, why not? That's what an alliance is. 1914, when World War I starts, almost every country in Europe is somehow sucked into a different alliance. We've created these super teams in Europe that are going to be competing for world status. Kind of gives me an idea.
All right, welcome back to Who Wants to Be a World Power? Let's meet today's contestants. From Germany, the one and only Kaiser Wilhelm II. From Austria-Hungary, the Emperor Franz Joseph. And from Italy, Victor Emmanuel II. That makes up Team 1, the Triple Alliance. And let's meet their opponents from the Triple Entente. From England, King George V and his Prime Minister David Lloyd George. From France, George Clemenceau, the Prime Minister, and yes, the S is silent. And from Russia, the one and only Tsar Nicholas II.
Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente ensured that all of Europe was divided up amongst these different alliances. Clear boundaries had been drawn. So therefore, Europe is covered by these different lines of alliances. And it's not just the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente.
Nicholas of Russia, George V of England, and Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany are all related. They're cousins. So beneath all these alliances is family drama.
And at the same time, every European country feels like it needs to pick a side. States like the Ottoman Empire will join the Triple Alliance. And there's 2 sides that are going to come into conflict very soon. The third main cause of World War I is imperialism, that concept that we've discussed of when a state expands outside its borders, generally for political or economic gain. Now again, imperialism is nothing new. We just spent a whole unit talking about it. States have been constantly pursuing land outside their borders, especially in order to get the resources they need to fuel the Industrial Revolution. But by 1900 or so, it's very clear that the world is running out of space. There's only so many places in the world that have the resources that are desired. Anytime more land becomes available, you know it's going to be contested. And one piece of land, one very important piece of land, just became available. That area is the Balkans, one of the most strategic water routes in the entire world. For most of history, it belonged to the Byzantines, but more recently, it belonged to the Ottoman Empire. And after fighting in the Crimean War continued, it was clear there was no current owner, especially as the Ottoman Empire continued to crumble, being known as the sick man of Europe. Many European countries believed that they should get the Balkans. Great Britain believed that it should maintain the Balkans because of its success in the Crimean War. The Ottomans obviously still thought it was theirs. Austria-Hungary was the closest nation to that area, so they thought naturally it should just become a part of Austria-Hungary. Both Germany and France are on quest to prove themselves as world powers, so of course they want it. And then of course there's Russia. Russia has always believed that that land belongs to them because Russia thinks that it's the inheritor of the Byzantine Empire. And then on top of that, you got the people who are actually living there who want none of those people to have it. You can certainly see why imperialism has caused increased tension in Europe. It's all because of the Balkans. Our fourth cause of World War I is nationalism, that concept that we've unpacked that describes the belief that a country's interests should be supported above all else. My country is better than yours. Remember, nationalism caused countries like Germany and Italy to unite in our last unit. It also increased pride in countries like Great Britain and France and Russia. Beneath it all, nationalism holds that my country needs to be better than yours, and I need to prove it to you. So of course that's going to contribute to all of these tensions that we're already seeing. But remember, nationalism is also when groups of people try to rule themselves, people that are connected by a religion or an ethnicity or a culture, trying to actually rule themselves. Naturally, nationalism plays a role in the Balkans. Again, the Balkans don't want to be ruled by France or Great Britain or Russia or the Ottoman Empire. They want to rule themselves. One example of this is Serbia, a Balkan nation who had recently revolted from the Ottoman Empire in 1912 and had gained its independence. The Serbians finally had the ability to rule themselves. For centuries, they had ruled by the Muslim Ottomans, and these Serbian Christians now had their own independence. There were also Serbs who were living in another country called Bosnia, which had actually just been annexed or gained by Austria-Hungary. And these Serbians living in Bosnia resented the fact that Austria-Hungary was ruling them. Nationalist Serbian groups became very popular with the intent that they would join Serbia. Yet Austria-Hungary claims that it rules the Serbians living in Bosnia and therefore technically kind of rules Serbia too. So you can see this nationalist conflict, again, creating more tension, getting Europe closer to exploding, especially in the Balkans. All right, I know you know that Europe is really tense and it's about to explode, but we need the spark to make that happen. That spark happens in 1914, and it all actually starts with Serbia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the heir apparent to the Austro-Hungarian throne, as Emperor Franz Joseph was in his later years in life. Like any good ruler, Franz Ferdinand wanted to make many public appearances to his loving, adoring people. But you have to remember, many people in the Austro-Hungarian Empire did not like Austria-Hungary itself, especially the Serbian nationalists living in Bosnia. Guess where Franz Ferdinand decided to visit? You guessed it, Bosnia, specifically the capital city of Sarajevo. And on top of that, the day he picked to visit and have his parade was the same day in which Serbs had gained independence from the Ottomans a few years earlier. So naturally, Franz Ferdinand was a target for the Serbian nationalist group. This group was called the Black Hand, and it had plans to try to throw off Austro-Hungarian rule over the Serbian people. And so on June 28, 1914, as Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sofia were traveling through the city of Sarajevo, a Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip assassinated Franz Ferdinand in the streets. Franz Ferdinand, you got served! At least that's how I imagine it happened. Would have been so much cooler if he said that. Actually, this was the second attempt on Franz Ferdinand's life that day, because earlier another conspirator from the Black Hand had thrown a bomb at the car, and it hadn't actually destroyed the car but caused it to swerve down a different direction. Gavrilo Princip actually thought he had missed his shot and went off to complain and get a sandwich, and all of a sudden the car showed up in front of him and he took his shot and ended up changing history forever. Talk about shooting your shot, am I right? You want to talk about a shot heard around the world? This is the one historically that's heard around the world. Because naturally, Austria-Hungary isn't going to handle their next in line emperor dying very well. In fact, what happens next is what we like to call an overreaction. That's right, Austria forgets that it's dealing with a rogue terrorist group and declares war on the entire state of Serbia, igniting what will be World War I. Now I get it, right now you're saying, Mr. Cain, there's no way this is a world war. It's a tiny state in Serbia against Austria. That's not a world war. Oh, but it will be. Just watch. Naturally, Serbia knew that it couldn't hang with Austria-Hungary in a war, so it called on its closest ally, its brothers in Russia. And Tsar Nicholas quickly answers the call, willing to help his Serbian brothers, knowing that this is actually a chance for maybe even Russian expansion. But now the odds are stacked against Austria-Hungary because you have Russia and Serbia going against just Austria-Hungary. Ah, but you forget that Austria-Hungary has help because of the Triple Alliance. Because of this, Germany will side with Austria-Hungary and will declare war on Russia. If you're getting confused and you're losing track, you have Russia and Serbia against Austria-Hungary and Germany. But remember, because of the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, more countries are getting dragged into this. Now, technically, we have Serbia, Russia, France, and Great Britain against Austria-Hungary, Germany, and even Italy. In the Triple Alliance, we also have a relationship with the Ottoman Empire. So suddenly, most of Europe is at war with each other. Now, yes, I get it. It's still not a world war. It actually never really is. It's a great war. In fact, that's what they actually called it. It's a bigger war than we've ever seen, and now most of Europe is at war in 1914. Overall, this seemed like a conflict that wouldn't last all that long. It'd be a relatively regional war in the Balkans, and it'd be solved pretty quickly because of all the different countries participating. But then Germany does this. Germany decides on a whim to attack France, which wasn't actually really involved yet. And it turns out that Germany had been planning this for a long time. It just needed an excuse to do it. Ever since the Franco-Prussian War, Germany wanted to attack France again. This was the Schlieffen Plan, and it involved Germany sneaking around France through Belgium to directly take the city of Paris. Who is it? It's Germany. Let us through. You'll have to come back later. We're making waffles and chocolate and whatever else Belgians do. Too bad. Germany waits for no one. See, the problem was Belgium was actually neutral. It's one of the few countries in Europe that wasn't in any of these alliances. And when Belgium said, no, Germany, you can't come through, Germany said, whatever, we're coming through. This is what drags Great Britain into the war. Because Germany violates Belgium's neutrality, Great Britain enters the war to fight Germany and help protect France. Now the war is truly a great war. By 1914, everyone in Europe is truly at war with each other. Much of that is due to Germany's aggression. Europeans were loving this. They had wanted to fight for a long time because of nationalism, and now they had a chance to show who was boss. In many ways, I compare Europeans in World War I to hobbits in Lord of the Rings. They think they're going on an adventure. You hear that, Sam? We're going on an adventure. Great. So where are we going? And while sure, this sounds fun, let's go see the world. Let's go have fun. Let's go on an adventure. All these young Europeans who willingly joined their militaries had no idea what they had just signed up for. Because this war is a great war. And it's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before. But that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching. See you next time.